I'd like to call to order the Clive City Council meeting for April the 11th. Would the clerk please call roll?
Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Council members Klein.
Here.
McCoy.
Here.
Judkins.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
McLennan.
Here. You'd all rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have approval of agenda. I am not aware of any changes.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The agenda is approved. Next up, we have citizen presentation. This is the opportunity citizen has to approach the council on an item not on the agenda. Do we have anyone in the chambers wishing to address us on an item not on the agenda? And while we ask that question, we'll ask Pete to check and see if there's anyone online who wishes to do so.
For those participating using Zoom, you can get our attention by using the raise hand function on your Zoom app. At the bottom of your screen, there's a long sort of horizontal bar of emojis. Go ahead, click on reactions and press raise hand.
While Pete is checking on that, just let me remind everyone in the chamber that we follow the pillars of character counts, endeavoring at all times to promote and model principles of trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. And in all of our business and the work that you do in the chambers, we expect everyone to follow those principles. Pete, did we have anyone?
No, Your Honor.
Then we'll move on to consent.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve consent. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Yes.
And would the clerk please post that vote? And consent items pass by a vote of 5-0. Richard.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm very excited tonight to present our newest operations specialist, Jamie Grant. Jamie comes to us from the city of Des Moines, where he spent the last 4 years in the Park and Recreation Department there. And with his hire and start date on Monday, we will be fully staffed and ready to rock and roll since it's going to be 85 this weekend. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie.
Jamie, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm very excited to get started with the city.
Well, thank you. Well, don't step away. Are there any questions for Jamie? Okay, you're safe to go now.
All right, thank you, guys. Nice to meet everybody.
All right, we'll move into our action items. The first is a public hearing on the new Code of Ordinances codification. Did we publish the appropriate public notice?
Yes, it was published in the Des Moines Register on March 29th, 2024.
Thank you, Paul. Matthew.
Yeah, so before you tonight is the consideration of an ordinance to adopt the entire Code of Ordinance for the city of Clive. This is commonly referred to as a recodification process. The goal of this process is simply to clean up the code. We do a lot of ordinances throughout the year. We amend the code, we change it. The state changes things, other agencies change things that we refer to. So the goal of this process is to clean up all those errors, not errors, but changes, not to enact new legislation. We did not do anything in there that would change how the city functions. Rather, we just clean things up. We got a memo in the packet outlining all of those changes that we made, and I'm happy to go through all of them if you like, or none of them if you like. But tonight is just the first reading of this ordinance, and we would recommend your approval, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Matthew on this?
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
Motion and second to close the public hearing. Before we do, is there anyone in the council who would like to address us on the code ordinances? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Yes.
And would the clerk please post that vote? The public hearing is closed by a vote of 5-0.
Move that ordinance number 1145, having been considered by the council, be voted on passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
Motion second for the first reading. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Yes.
And would the clerk please post that vote? First reading passes by a vote of 5-0. Next up, we have Doug on the Silver Star edition.
Thank you. Good evening. What you have before you tonight is a proposed preliminary plat for an approximately 4-acre parcel of property, generally at the intersection of 156 and Hickman. As you'll recall from a few months ago, there was a discussion around the property with respect to the rezoning of the property for commercial retail and service uses. That decision was made by the council, so what we're dealing with tonight is the question of the subdivision of the property. So this is the first step in subdividing property to allow for ultimately future development to occur on the property. So the preliminary plat specifically gives the city the opportunity to evaluate the capacity of the infrastructure to support the subdivision of the property. So questions of what is the necessary roadway infrastructure, water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, et cetera. Either is it in place or is it a function of the developer to install those improvements to provide the requisite capacity for the future development? Following approval of a preliminary plat, applicants would then move on to the next step, which would be either submittal of construction drawings, which would be the specific details associated with the public improvements. In this particular case, the applicant has started the process of designing the roadway improvements that are necessary for the property. That also has a component of stormwater as part of those right-of-way improvements. Also, what comes after a preliminary plat are considerations for the actual site improvements themselves. So in this case, this 4 acres is proposed to be subdivided into 3 approximately 1.5 acre commercial sites. And each one of those sites, when it's time for development, will submit a site plan for their very specific 1.5 acre parcel, which would be reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately by the City Council. And that site plan outlines and details in very specific terms, questions of building locations, parking lots, accesses, landscaping, site lighting, noises associated with the commercial activity, et cetera. So again, this is the first step in several steps of the development process. What you have before you here, again, is a preliminary plat. It has been reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. They did recommend approval to you folks tonight. Staff has reviewed it, found it to be in conformance with the subdivision ordinance and the previously approved zoning change agreement. So we are recommending approval of it to you tonight. We do have representatives from the property owner applicant. I believe there are also property owners adjacent to this particular property that may have some interest in the discussion tonight as well. So with that, I think I'll stop and give you a chance to answer or ask any questions that you might have at
Questions
this
for
point.
Doug?
So I was just wondering, I think you mentioned that the plating proposal is in line with the zoning agreement.
That is correct.
Is that, I guess, remind me, if I don't remember, where did we land on the roadway? I know that was a discussion topic.
So again, this parcel has been developed with a commercial bank. As part of their site plan, they made improvements to Emerald Isle adjacent to their property. As this property develops, the zoning change agreement established the responsibility for the property owner to make improvements to Emerald Isle Drive from Hickman to the point where the bank stopped.
Okay.
Uh,
So-
those plans are in the process of being reviewed.
And that would be during the development, not the plating, right?
So they have the preliminary plat, which was identifying the conceptual subdivision of the property. We are in review of the construction drawings that will be approved by the council probably within the next few weeks. They will get underway with the demolition of the existing site features on the property, the existing houses. Once the construction drawings are approved, they'll be underway with the construction of the public improvements. And then kind of along this path as well, they will submit for their particular interest, which would be the lot 2, the one in the middle, for a site plan approval for the construction of a car wash. And then that will then subsequently get underway in terms of its construction as well, all coming to a point of conclusion in theory later this fall.
Any other questions from the council? Otherwise, we'll invite others in the chamber. Would someone in the chamber like to address us on this matter?
Good evening. I'm Joel Templeman with the Lillis O'Malley Law Firm, 505 Fifth Avenue, Suite 1005, Des Moines. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant. And as Doug laid out, we're here to seek approval on the preliminary plat. I have a couple representatives from Midwest Fidelity Partners here with me, along with one of our engineers. We've reviewed the staff report and recommendation. We would ask council to vote to approve our preliminary plat this evening. But we're happy to answer any questions you have for any of us regarding the preliminary plat.
Any questions at this point? Eric?
Can you tell me about your plans for demolition of the current existing structures on there? I had a chance to drive by and look pretty rough. Can you give me a timeline and planning on that sequence?
Sure. I'm going to defer to TJ Nelson on the timeline, but I believe the City of Clive Fire Department and Police Department have been using
They have.
a few of those structures for training purposes, but I'll defer to TJ as to when that actual demolition will occur.
TJ Nelson with MFP. So we don't have a hard scheduled date for those yet, likely in May ahead of what we would hope to be a June construction start. So till then, we've been working with the fire department and PD so they can use those for training. And that's why they look so rough. They've been chainsawing into the roofs and whatnot. So thanks. Yep.
Is there anyone else in the council who would like to address us on this matter?
Good evening, council. I'm Ben Bruner with the Dickinson Law Firm, 801 Grand Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa. Here on behalf of Iowa Trust and Savings Bank. Paul Pick is also here as a representative of the bank. Obviously throughout this process, the bank has had concerns primarily on the operational effect that this development will ultimately have on the bank's operation immediately adjacent to the west there. And those concerns continue here. The primary, concern and objection with this preliminary plat specifically, and I don't know if we've talked about it in previous meetings or not, but there's a cross-access point where there's an internal
Put
roadway.
a map up.
I do have one. And I believe this is an accurate depiction. This was in my files here.
Slide it over just for general reference. It's not going to be exact, but you'll kind of get the gist.
Right. So as you can see, this is kind of that cross-access point there. Here's the platted parcel here. Here's the bank operation. Ultimately, there's a right-in, right access off of 156. Ultimately, what the bank is after, we're worried. We've got employees, we've got customers that are going to be entering or using the bank, utilizing the bank. Here's the drive-through, which will come through here and then again spit up there. Our primary concern is safety and operational issues there. We're going to have presumably 3 high-traffic operations. The original proposal, I believe, was a 2-lot setup, car wash, and then maybe a small-scale office space. That's obviously shifted to this more narrow 3-lot setup, which I think probably dictates car wash and fast food operations, which are high traffic operations. I think ultimately the concerns are fairly obvious. If we have high traffic operations to the east, if there's any sort of internal traffic congestion or confusion, that gets funneled directly over to this bank's operation, which an office use and these high traffic fast food and car wash uses aren't wholly congruent there. So inevitably, there's going to be, in our view, operational issues just with the internal traffic flow and safety issues as, again, the bulk of the traffic, I believe, coming up on 156, more than likely, they'll take that right in to the bank's lot as compared to getting to Emerald Isle in an attempt to get to the other operators slash establishments to the east there. So that's our primary concern. And so our specific request would be to eliminate that cross-access point. And ultimately, I think the city staff has said the capacity on the reconstructed Emerald Isle and 154th there's adequate capacity to handle these operations. So it shouldn't be a hard ask, I think, to ask them to funnel their internal traffic flow to those roadways directly as compared to using the bank slot as an additional funnel for those high traffic operations. So that's our specific request and our primary focus here. And then just generally, I mean, the subdivision plat here, we just don't have enough information on the city's statements as to the adequacy of both the water, storm sewer, basically the primary infrastructure issues. We'd request additional time and information to kind of look at that information. If there's engineering reports, certain studies that were ultimately developed or reviewed to basically come to the conclusion that those facilities are adequate. And if there's additional information that we can digest, see how that affects the bank slot, see how it affects the adjacent lots and the future development of those lots, that would give us some comfort knowing short-term and long-term that those infrastructure items have been appropriately vetted. And we just like to have that information, to have the conversation with the city staff, with the applicant, again, to ensure long-term operational harmony and peace, because this is our last chance at the infrastructure. Those items can't be addressed through the site plan process. So specifically, we'd request that cross-access be removed. Generally, we'd request additional information as to the statements that the infrastructure is adequate and a chance to ultimately have conversations with city staff and the applicant prior to any plat approval. And then just generally, we'd object to ultimately the approval of this preliminary plat. But the alternative, again, would be to continue this, allow additional information to be either presented, submitted, evaluated, developed, so we can have additional time to review that and have the appropriate conversations with staff and the applicant to, again, ensure long-term harmony and operation of this collective track. So with that, I thank you for your time and effort, certainly. And if there's any questions on our end, certainly let us know.
Any questions? Doug, do you want to respond to some of the issues he's raised?
Yes. In terms of the infrastructure that is within the subdivision and would be installed as part of the subdivision, the city of Clive installed the public sanitary sewer and the public water mains in this area. 1999 or 2000, if I remember correctly. We had understanding that this area would be commercial use at that time and designed and installed water and sanitary sewer that is more than sufficient to accommodate this roughly 5-acre ground and then the overall approximately 20 acres of kind of the redeveloped Emerald Isle area. So in terms of the ability to convey waste from the facilities and to deliver potable water, that there really are no questions or concerns. These are, again, relatively small developments in the scheme of things. So we have no questions at all about that capacity. The roadway itself, as we've discussed, is an existing rural roadway section. So kind of a hodgepodge of paving materials that we've kind of added over the time. We do understand and have been consistent in requiring that those facilities be upgraded to the urban standard for any development, which obviously started with the development of the bank and would continue with this particular development. The roadway itself, again, is a very short roadway segment. It isn't going to convey a lot of traffic just because it's a very short roadway segment. The primary concerns will really be at the intersections. So the Hickman intersection and 154th and the Emerald Isle Drive and 156th Street intersections. Those intersections, if there is a capacity issue, are really what's going to show. In terms of the intersection with Hickman Road, that is going to be primarily driven by improvements that the DOT makes to Hickman Road. It's certainly can be challenging to cross Hickman Road as it is today. In this particular intersection, there's about 30,000 vehicles a day using Hickman. So finding that gap to be able to get out onto Hickman can be challenging today. It's not going to get any better with development. But again, it's a function of what is on Hickman Road, not what is being developed adjacent to Hickman Road or on this particular property. We do envision and have had conversations with the DOT that particular intersection is liable to be modified in the future. So as Hickman Road likely widens to a 6-lane facility and increased capacity is necessary, 156th Street, we fully understand and can appreciate the fact that that intersection is liable to be restricted. So it may not be fully restricted to right in, right out only, but it may ultimately end up being restricted in a way that would be similar to what's in front of the Menards, where the left turns are allowed to be made, but you cannot cross the interstate, which is the most dangerous maneuver that would happen out there. So we do fully envision that will happen at some point in the future. So the need for a bigger, wider intersection there is not something that is warranted at this point. In terms of the 156 and 156 and Emerald Isle Drive, we did anticipate the need for separating the left and the right turn movements. So the bank, when they made the improvements, added some additional paving width at the intersection to accommodate those turns. Again, that intersection will certainly suffice for quite some time. It is something that will have to be evaluated just as any commercial driveway or street segment intersects a busy arterial. We have them all over the place where at times the level of service or the delay that people experience might become problematic. And in those cases, you look at design solutions that could include traffic signals or other types of means. But at this point, with the proposed development, there is not a concern about the ability to get cars in or out of this particular area. In terms of the question of the cross access, as you can see from the preliminary plat, the 3 lots, because of its relatively narrow frontage to the roadway, city did not want to see 3 driveways out to Emerald Isle Drive, right? This lot having its own driveway, this one, and then another one out. It's very standard for us to look at trying to instill a manner of access management for all of our developments for the common good. So as we worked with the bank as kind of the first piece in this overall development, we did require, as part of the site plan approval process, the reservation of an ingress egress easement. So the pavement itself did not get installed, but there was an easement established to allow for the accommodation in the future if there was a need. So as we move into this particular plat, because we were looking at access management functions, this is a possible access point. And it is something that would be evaluated when the site plan for lot 1 came in. If it's a type of use that would have an advantage to have access, great. The accommodations are there to support it. But it doesn't at this moment require that driveway access be created. It is something that will be evaluated when that site plan comes in. But at this particular moment, to kind of undo the access easement opportunity is not something staff would support. The flexibility needs to be there. It may be used in the future, but it's also possible that the particular use itself won't have a need for it.
Is that easement sole discretion of the city?
The easement was established, granted as a public ingress egress easement. So it is of record and would be available to be used in the event that the site plan on the adjacent property has a need for it.
But the city would have to allow that to happen in the future. The property owner adjacent can call that easement up too, or?
It is a public ingress egress easement. It is granted to the city for the general benefit of the community.
It doesn't, by getting not wanting to have too many, exit points there onto Emerald Isle, would it be possible to add one off of one of the 3 lots to kind of alleviate some of that congestion into the bank?
Again, I think it's speculation at this point about congestion. Depending on the nature of the uses that do come before you as a site plan. There, again, in my mind is some question on how much will that driveway be utilized.
I agree. So is that something we could do in the future? We would have that option in the future, in a future site plan?
So again, from staff's perspective, it is something that would be evaluated and open conversations about when a submittal for lot 1 is made for a site plan.
Then you could say, you need to put a driveway in there at the edge of lot 1 towards the western edge.
That might be a possibility, certainly. If the flow and the layout worked best that way, sure. If it is something where, boy, this really just makes the most sense, great, let's do that. But again, until we know the nature and the specific user of lot 1, giving up the flexibility at this point is not something that staff would recommend as being
So
prudent.
Doug, you would evaluate those on a case-by-case management. What kind of metrics would you use to establish that, to go on to that, to actually open that up right there? And there's, what type of things are you considering then?
Yeah, I think, again, it will be very much dependent on the user and what that user's layout needs to be. If it's a small office use that doesn't have a lot of circulation needs and just needs a small parking field, they may be perfectly satisfied with just kind of developing off of the front driveway, for example. If it is a different type of use that has more of a circulation pattern necessary, then again, maybe that access makes more sense. So, the metric is mostly going to be about what is going to yield the most efficient utilization of the property within the context of the area.
Well, if we could, to Eric's question, I'll just be a little more straightforward. If that's a fast food, the bank continues to say fast food. If that's a fast food restaurant, what would you probably lean towards as a?
I would say, and then we kind of use the reference at the Planning and Zoning Commission, if it's a Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a much more detailed conversation requesting some specific analysis around circulation patterns, traffic patterns themselves.
It'll be their pleasure.
And that may be a situation where, you know, again, depending on how that circulation pattern works, if they have a design that kind of funnels everything to that point, we're going to probably say, hey, let's look and maybe we need another driveway point, or let's reorient the development in a way that doesn't have a negative impact. You know, again, the city staff's perspective here is not to create adverse conditions for individuals. We want to ensure that we have the most efficient and orderly overall land development pattern. So our intent is certainly not to create a situation that anyone is going to be dissatisfied with down the road.
So Doug, if lot 2 is developed first, right? And there is that access point to Emerald Isle Drive there, that would be another consideration point, right? Is
Sure.
it possible to, you know, kind of put another adjacent widening there? Or is it possible to just route through there? I mean, I'm just assuming that's up for consideration as well.
Yeah, I would say again, if this particular lot's layout was something where it needed more access, and we felt like the access is going to have an adverse impact on the bank, sure, we might be talking about, you know, a driveway in this location generally.
Or even like expanding the proposed driveway there. Yeah, right.
This particular driveway is 24 feet wide, so
Okay.
it's more than sufficient to accommodate both way traffic.
So maybe it's just routing the circulation that
It
way.
really comes down to what type of use and does it require a lot of
Sure.
that? If it is just, again, kind of an in to a parking lot, you know, quick serve kind of a situation, that's one thing. If it's a high volume Chick-fil-A type business, then again, we'll have a different conversation.
Point is, we have the flexibility to adjust based off of that. type of-
Correct. This preliminary plat really has no bearing on that. It is a very much site plan specific question.
Other questions? Anything else, Doug?
That's all I have unless you have others.
Unless there's anything from anyone else in the chamber, we're looking for approval of a preliminary plat.
I'll move the resolution approving the preliminary plat.
Second.
Motion second to approve the preliminary plat. Further discussion? Seeing none, with the council, please vote.
Mayor, I'll be abstaining.
Thank you.
Yes.
And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes with 4 affirmative and 1 abstention. Thank you all. More to come. Next, we have a site plan for Berkshire Commons Office Part 1.
Thanks.
We'll get it one day. Okay, we have a request for a site plan approval for a new commercial office building for Covenant Construction located at 2640 Berkshire Parkway, which is Lot 5 of Berkshire Commons Office Park Plat 1. The applicant in the proposal is Covenant Group LLC. The subject property is approximately 1.2 acres in size, and the proposed use is consistent with the zoning of the property, and the aesthetics are harmonious with the rest of the larger office park development in the area. Staff has not received commentary for or against the request, and notices were mailed March 25th of 2024 to adjacent property owners within 310 feet. The proposed office building before you is approximately 7,464 square feet in size, 1-story tall, and is comprised of primarily masonry cladding, brick veneer, and glass. The east elevation facing Berkshire Parkway contains an enhanced entrance vestibule to break up the roof line, and a residential pitched roof is proposed as required within the original development agreement. I'll switch off here for the actual site plans. Access is provided by shared access to the south, and the parking is in excess of the minimum requirements due to the nature of the business, general contracting. An additional open space and landscaping has been provided to compensate for the additional stalls as required by the zoning ordinance. Accessible stalls are provided, and a sidewalk provides access to the building entries from the public walks. Additionally, sidewalk connects to the extension of the public walk along Berkshire Parkway to accommodate pedestrian traffic. Sometimes I wish that I would read ahead of myself. Staff met with the applicant on site to discuss protected landscaping. What has been identified to be removed is mostly volunteer trees and scrub brush along the unnamed creek. While the volunteer trees and scrub brush landscaping will be removed, the applicant has provided the required landscaping to reestablish the natural essence of the area. No replacement penalties are necessary for the removal of the identified landscaping. Appropriate public utilities exist to service the site, and stormwater will be managed by a bioretention basin that ultimately outlets to the north of the site into the creek. At this time, staff would recommend approval of Berkshire Commons Office Park Lot 5, pending the resolution of any outstanding items on the comment letter dated, I believe it's March 29th was the most recent, and receipt and review of any legal documents. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
I'll move approval of the site plan.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the site plan. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote?
Yes.
And will the clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 5-0. Thank you. Next, we have a professional services agreement with OPN. Matt.
Thank you, Your Honor. Over the last couple of months, the staff has been going with DCI Group, and Kelsey Richardson is here from DCI as well, going through an RFP process for the security and enhancement remodel of this facility, City Hall Library Building, mainly the office spaces, council chambers area, not the what I would call the front of house of the library, because we've done a lot of improvements to that here in the recent 5-6 years. But focusing on those staff areas in this council chambers and some of the security concerns and flow of the overall building. And we sent out an RFP. We received 5 responses to that RFP. And both DCI, myself, and then Angie Fonku from Sidekick as a consultant under the DCI contract evaluated those proposals. We scored them and then identified OPN and ISG as kind of the top 2 from those 5 proposals. Moved on to an interview phase. We received presentations from both teams. And following those presentations, we would recommend before you tonight a contract with OPN. OPN has a lot of experience doing city hall facilities. You've been in a number of them in the metro area, whether it's been Johnston City Hall, which they designed, which was a new construction project, portions of Ankeny's remodels and their council chambers and their library. Even the Carroll City Hall was remodeled and designed by OPN and a number of other public facilities. They also specialize in library and library space areas as well. In terms of the scoring, we looked at project experience, the ability to perform the work, kind of their approach to the project, and of course the fee proposal. OPN scored the highest in our perspective on all those fronts, and their fee proposal was kind of in the lower third of the fees that the range of fees that we saw amongst the 5 proposals. Terry Gebhardt, who is I believe he's on Zoom tonight, he's off-site, is here to answer any questions from the OPN team. He'll be leading the OPN team. For some of you who have been around for a while, Terry actually worked on some design concepts of this building I think 15-ish years ago when actually in 2008, when the referendum for a new library was proposed, OPN helped work on that and evaluated reuse of this building. So Terry is here. He has a lot of history with this building as well, and that previous experience also weighed in on our recommendation before you tonight. So happy to answer any questions. We would have a kickoff pending your approval of this contract tonight. That's also been reviewed, wanted to mention, by legal counsel. We would have a kickoff here next week, and we have kind of an internal stakeholder group of city staff, department heads to work through the design process, and also Mayor Edwards and Councilmember Weaver representing the council when we start talking about how we rework this room for this facility and for the public. And so with that, Your Honor, unless there's any questions of me, Terry is also online, and Kelsey's here with us from the DCI team on our construction management side we'd be happy to answer any questions and would recommend approval.
Questions?
How long of a project are we thinking this will be?
So it kind of depends
How many
on
meetings do I have to go to?
what's, how much, how many meetings do you have to go through? Hopefully not many. We're actually going to be pretty aggressive on the design process, and a lot of this is predicated. We also have DCI as our construction manager on the Greenbelt Landing project across the street. And part of the reason why we wanted to have DCI also work on this project is there's going to be some cost efficiencies for the city. They're going to have a site superintendent and project managers on site for the Greenbelt Landing project starting this summer, and then that work will slow down in the winter months. And our hope is the time then the remodel work to start in the winter months here, and so we can share site superintendents and definitely save cost for the city in terms of that management of both projects. It's very rare where you have projects kind of across the street from each other. We're looking to take advantage of that. So our hope is to be pretty aggressive on the design process to have something bid out by November, December of this year. Some of the time of the construction of the project will really predicate on the design and how we're phasing it in terms of where we move staff. So depending on if we're trying to do it all at once and trying to move staff, and then of course the council chambers will likely move to the public safety building temporarily and the training room. How we need to stage that will drive the construction schedule. I think that's fair to say, Kelsey, of how that would work out. So our hope is in 2025, there would be completion when would be dependent upon that phasing. But our hope is to kind of fit in that gap in the middle of Greenbelt Landing. We know some of it's going to overlap at certain times, but again, there'll be at different phases in construction. So we'll be able to share that site superintendent across both projects.
Questions for Matt? Well, if there are no questions, I entertain a resolution.
I'll move approval of the contract for OPN.
Second?
Motion is second to approve the agreement. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote?
Yes.
And that passes by a vote of 5-0. Thank you all. Next, we have a public hearing on the budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Now that we've conducted the distinct tax hearing this evening, this is the next step in the budget process. The proposed budget reflects what we presented in our budget work sessions and then also reflects the goals of the City Council. We'll be reducing the property tax from 1014 to 992, and the budget also incorporates the new state requirements and the proposed utility rate increases that we also discussed. Staff recommends setting the public hearing for April 25th and publish required notice. Questions?
Second.
Motion is second to approve the public hearing date. Further discussion? Seeing none, would the council please vote?
Yes.
And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0. You're still up on utility rate.
I am. As a result of our budget discussions, and what we have prepared in the budget is appropriate next step to move forward with the cash flows that were provided by PFM in getting the new utility rates in place. So Clive's rates are proposed to stay at the mid to low tier as it relates to the other comparable cities. It is evident that the city is committed to the long-term investment, reinvesting in our infrastructure. So we have incorporated a 3% increase on water, 2% on sewer rates, and then stormwater at 8%. And that is how we prepared the ordinances in the packet. I did want to draw your attention to the stormwater rate ordinance because staff is proposing that we increase the square footage of the impervious surface areas from 3,200 square feet to 4,100 square feet. And this is going to impact the commercial ratepayers as that ERU is going up. And again, I suppose that depends on the commercial property size itself. After we go through the 3 readings and the ordinances are approved, they're scheduled to go into effect in May. It will be just in time to be billed in June, and then they'd be paid in July. With the rate changes, of course, we've already informed our communication specialist, Molly, to make sure that the communications are in front of those taxpayers that are affected.
Any questions for Liz? Otherwise,
Liz, what's the change? What's the reason for that change in the ERU?
Now my understanding is that staff from.
So, yeah, I'll jump in.
Okay.
So when we updated basically the impervious surface across the city, that average equivalent residential unit in terms of that surface area went up on average. So we kind of talked a little bit about this last year when we set the tiers for the residential rates, where that middle tier was equivalent of that 1 ERU at 4,100, and then you had kind of a half ERU and then 1.5 ERUs for the bigger residential lots. So to align with that residential rate structure of 4,100 square feet, we have new information basically and more accurate data. We're proposing to raise that up to 4,100. So what does that mean for a commercial? It's a benefit to them, to a commercial property owner. So if before they had 5 ERUs because they had 15,000 square feet of impervious surface at I'm just doing quick math, rough 3,000 ERU. Well, if you go to 4,100, now you don't have as many ERUs. It goes from 5 to 4.1 or whatever. So you're paying 1 ERU less, essentially equivalent to the rate. So for us, it's about equity, right? We've talked over a number of years about having that equity between residential and commercial ratepayers in terms of the load that they share in terms of the stormwater utility. Now that we have that accurate information, updated information on our impervious surface, it's our recommendation to update that because we have that updated data. Yes, there'll be a little bit of shift from commercial to residential, but that was part of what we knew would happen with that updated information. So does that answer your question?
So,
I move that ordinance number 1142 pertaining to water rates, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to final adoption.
Second.
Motion is second on ordinance 1142. Further discussion? Being done with the council, please vote on the first reading.
Yes.
And will clerk please post that vote? That passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move that ordinance number 1143 pertaining to sewer rates, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
Motion is second on ordinance 1143. Further discussion? Being none, will the council please vote?
Yes.
And will the clerk please post that vote? And that passes by a vote of 5-0.
Move that ordinance number 1144 pertaining to stormwater rates, having been considered by the council, be voted on for passage prior to its final adoption.
Second.
Motion is second on ordinance 1144. Further discussion? Seeing none, will the council please vote?
Yes.
And will the clerk please post that vote?
thank you.
That passes by a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Liz. Next, we have a discussion on Alice's Road reconstruction.
Good thing I like roundabouts.
Go for it. Thank you, Matt. Mayor, council, good evening. Back in January, we approved a professional services contract with Snyder and Associates for phase 1 design of the Alice's Road reconstruction project. In addition to the phase 1 design, it included the preliminary conceptual design of phases 2, 3, and 4. Snyder's been working very hard on that, and they're here tonight to, I guess, discuss some of those elements with you, get your input, and bring you up to date on the progress we've made on the design of this project. With us tonight from Snyder Associates, we have Gabe Nelson and Todd Knox, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Like you said, I'm Gabe Nelson with Snyder and Associates. I'm the project manager for the project. I brought with me Todd Knox, who from our traffic group. So in a second here, we'll get into a lot more detail into traffic. But before we do that, I'd like to kind of just give you a general update on various aspects of the project that we've been working on or starting to work on. Environmental study that'll be necessary with the project that'll get into just a little bit of detail. Kind of what we've looked at so far to incorporate stormwater management into the project. Just briefly what we'll do moving forward for aesthetics, and then a lot of quite a bit of detail here on the traffic analysis. So we've broken the project into really 4 phases, but we look at it in terms of 2 phases initially. The phase 1 project is from Horizon Drive
up through south of Douglas Parkway, probably about 300 feet south of Douglas Parkway. That is the first project that'll be constructed. We're looking at starting that construction in 2025. It may go into 2026. We'll get in, as we get more into the detailed design, we'll know how long to allot for that construction. We're anticipating that's 100% city funded. And part of the reason we don't need to do some of the in-depth environmental studies that we will have to do in the subsequent phases are because of that city funding. So the phase 2 through 4 project, and really phase 2 is kind of Douglas Parkway. Phase 3 is from Douglas up to Berkshire to Meredith is phase 4. But we're studying all of that at once. And we're anticipating, well, currently through the city of Waukee, the intersection of Douglas and Alice's has $1.35 million in federal funding. City's recently asked for an additional $1 million in STBG funding for the Douglas to Berkshire portion, and plans to probably keep asking for additional federal funds for subsequent phases in the future. So with that, it pulls in the need to do NEPA investigations. We actually work with the Iowa DOT to classify what level of documentation we'll need to do as part of that project based on some anticipated impacts of the project. We've recently received word from them that they're classifying this as what a Pell NEPA study. So the Pell part of it is planning and environmental linkages. So basically that's kind of the alternatives analysis that we do, that we study we investigate the environmental impacts of. And then NEPA is obviously the National Environmental Policy Act. So that's what says when you're spending federal dollars of a federal action, this is the level of, this is basically the process you have to follow, the level of documentation you have to follow. So as part of our original contract, we were assuming a lower level of documentation for the project. I think this is probably gonna overall, just with the amount of study that will need to be done with this decision, it'll probably extend out the environmental investigations that we'll need to do. So we'll probably be, a lot of the decisions we're talking about this evening as far as studying intersections and stuff like that, the decisions for phase 2 through 4, that'll kind of get extended out through that Pell NEPA study phase. And then, will be the decisions, I guess, on the phase 1 projects that those need to come a lot faster because those are the ones we'll be building starting next year. Looking at putting stormwater management into the project and how we're going to manage stormwater. This is the phase 1 area. So what we've been tasked with is these are kind of the drainage areas that flow towards Alice's Road in that phase 1 area. And all of these areas, the corridor has been developed, the upstream drainage areas have been developed, and they would have provided detention for those major storm events. But because of the age of the developments, they don't necessarily provide any water quality improvements for the lower events. So what we're looking at as part of this is treating that upstream stormwater before it gets to Alice's Road and eventually flows into Clive and into the creek. So these are 3 different areas that we're looking at. They're fairly open areas. There's one that's kind of the bottom of the page there is that is a regional detention basin that's controlled by an LLC that's owned by Nat Properties. That takes the area off of the Hy-Vee area. There's the One Neck Data Center that there's basically a draw that runs in the front yard of the data center. And then there's the Mid-American Energy Substation that there's a fairly large area there. So we've spoken with Mid-Am, the operator of the One Neck Data Center and Nat Properties. They've all been open to allowing us to further investigate those areas to see if we can do some kind of improvements to those areas to treat the stormwater before it gets into the storm sewer system and then continues to flow off to the east.
So are those going to be like ponds or?
So likely We're going through the different options for, well, actually, they'll probably look a lot like they look today. So what we would probably do is look at amending the soils to allow infiltration of like the first inch of stormwater that falls on there. So we'd allow it to infiltrate versus right now, it just, all those smaller storms just run off into the storm sewer system. Actually, Knapp would probably like that to be a pond. That's what they kind of look more like an amenity. But from a stormwater management perspective, it may just be better just to infiltrate it into the ground. So that's some options we're continuing to refine. They have allowed us, we'll have to take some soil borings and kind of figure out some of the different aspects of what we might want to do there and then go back to the property owners. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd and he can go into the traffic analysis that we've done to date.
All right, thanks, Gabe. So basically, just wanted to reiterate, the project intersections are along Alice's Road, the Northeast Horizon Drive, Northeast Boston Parkway, Northeast Delwood Drive, Douglas Parkway, Berkshire Parkway, and then also included was the Douglas and Berkshire Parkway intersections. We took traffic counts last year in November to see what sort of the traffic patterns were. Basically, Alice's Road, it has between like 13,000 vehicles south of Horizon up to around 8,000 vehicles up near Meredith Drive. Kind of what we were kind of expecting for traffic along there. Then we reached out to the Des Moines area MPO to see what are their forecasts for these corridors. And what we found out was they're projecting out to 2050 increases traffic on Alice's Road from the up to like 16 to 18,000 in those same areas. So not a huge increase, but yet still a significant increase for the corridor. And then Douglas Parkway was around 8 to 10,000. So again, some increases, but not too much. We also looked at the crashes that are occurring along the corridor. And fortunately, there's not a whole lot of crashes that are occurring along the corridor. We've in the last 5 years, we noticed that there was only 2 minor injuries at these all the project intersections, which is great. Hurts for future safety funds for potential project funds, but it's great for that no injuries are occurring. However, we also looked at the DOT. They have a potential for crash reduction rating of all intersections across the state. And we noticed that they rated Alice and Douglas high on that list. However, as we dove deeper into that rating, we noticed that they have that intersection classified as a two-way stop control throughout their rating. Well, at the start of their rating period, it was the span wire signal was installed. So they're not really comparing apples to apples in that situation. So it's hard to say that it's a high potential for crash reduction because you're not comparing to other traffic signals. From that information, we went into started looking at operational aspects of these intersections. 3 of those intersections, Northeast Horizon, Northeast Boston Parkway, and Northeast Delwood, they're currently T intersections with the likeliness of a 4th intersection, our 4th approach added to them. So we were like, let's go ahead, analyze them today as if they're a full 4-way intersection to see what worst case scenario would be for these intersections. And then to make sure we put some traffic on it, we assume that traffic from the west side would be about equal on the east side. So just a way to analyze them comparably. And we compared traffic signals to roundabouts across all the intersections. And basically, if you want to look at the numbers, everything's good. There's really nothing of anything that stands out that we'd be worried about. And in this case, roundabouts tended to operate slightly better than the traffic signals. Now moving on to 2050. Okay, we noted that the traffic grew to 2050 from existing, so we put on a 2 to 3% growth across all the intersections. That's a conservative, trying to shoot high for the traffic volume so that we're not underrepresenting where we need to have future improvements. Going through that, we identified one. You see that one highlighted cell, that's Northeast Horizon and Alice's Road. The eastbound, the west side we identify the roundabout as poor operation, but one thing we have in our benefit right now is Alice's Road south of Northeast Horizon is a 6-lane facility, and we're constructing a 4-lane Alice's Road corridor. So we have the potential to build what's called a bypass lane so that the eastbound right turn movements can connect directly to that sixth lane, the outside lane, and not impact the actual operations of the roundabout. So we could, that's an option that we can do to alleviate that one poor movement out there 25 plus years from now, if we need to. So operationally, everything is basically okay. Now, we also continued to move on and we analyze life cycle costs. And from that, we compared the overall construction costs based on very preliminary layouts, the typical maintenance for traffic signals versus roundabouts, the delay incurred by drivers, the emissions, those sorts of aspects of it, including the safety aspects, because roundabouts tend to be about 75% safer, at least especially for injuries, than traffic signals. So we factored those in. We actually we used some national standards for time value of money, or time value of somebody's time. So we applied those and we came up with this table. Basically, the roundabouts cost over the life cycle of it roughly $2 to $10 million less than what a traffic signal would be across these intersections from our analysis. So what are our recommendations? Well, we're recommending at this point roundabouts at all the project intersections. And then if there's some other full public intersections, those could be roundabouts as well. But we're looking at the Alice's and Douglas, because of we're proposing to be 4 lanes in all the directions, it'd have to be a 2-lane full roundabout. And the other ones, we call them a hybrid roundabout, where 2 lanes would be on Alice's Road and then 1 lane from the side street. You may ask why we were looking at why we selected roundabouts. 1, life cycle cost, roundabouts were less. 2, safety. Roundabouts, it's hard to argue the safety factor because they they minimize the chance of severe crashes, the right angle crashes that you can get at traffic signals and other intersections. 3, we're really changing at Horizon. We're changing from a commercial corridor to a residential corridor. So we're going from lots of people trying to get to all these businesses to now they're trying to get homes where people might be walking along the streets and things like that. And the roundabouts tend to traffic calm the corridor. So slow down speeds, make things a little bit safer. So with all that, that's how we came up with the recommendation to recommend roundabouts at all these intersections. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Gabe to kind of show what we could be looking at.
Can I interrupt right here?
Yeah.
Sure. Fire chief question. I haven't heard any feedback on, and this just my ignorance is this, the ability to navigate those with ladder trucks. You look at our mutual aid has grown as well. I see West Des Moines, maybe it's just their joy of driving it out of Station 2, but the ladder truck with the extra driver in the back. How do these work with that?
I have no idea. That particular truck is designed to take sharper turns. So I would forecast that particular truck being easier.
Than your ladder truck?
Correct.
Yeah, so how about yours, which is gonna be our first one to go, our Urbandale, or
I have personally never driven our ladder truck through a roundabout. My guess is the first couple times it probably is scary. However,
I'll
I'm
give
sure
it a
that that has been analyzed through traffic studies and turn studies and those kinds of things, but I can't honestly speak on.
I assume it's been studied as well, but has it?
Well, the roundabouts can be designed specifically for fire trucks, whichever one that you want. We can set it up so that,
We want them all, right?
yeah, well,
Really? I
Truck
mean,
and fire, we want to make sure it's compatible.
absolutely.
You know, a business I run had a fire. We had 6 ladder trucks there.
Yep, absolutely.
These things matter, and one of them or 2 of them might have come up from that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's part of the design process. We have preliminary layouts that we haven't gone into what type of vehicles would be going through them yet. We'll refine these designs based on input from the fire, from other places, and make sure that we have the right design vehicle so that we don't have to worry about the fire trucks getting through the roundabouts slowly. We'll make sure that we do our job to prevent or minimize the delay that the fire trucks have to respond to those places. Oops, sorry.
And one thing about the roundabouts, we're not talking about Clark Street roundabouts. We're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about a little bigger, a little double. The other thing that they,
The Johnston ones or?
We have
Oh,
Cedar Hill 3
156th
out
in
there.
Boston, right?
But
We
yeah.
got one right there. So I mean, we
Berkshire,
could try,
Boston,
we could.
and-
but one of the things now is when they design it, the inside can be a mountable curb where it's paved. That's not actually part of the surface. But for the larger vehicles, they can drive right over it without causing any damages. And that's one of the things that we would talk about.
Cause
And the
Clark
Clark-
Street, I imagine you just drive over that.
You know,
We
but
can actually
thing.
make it around those
Oh, really?
without touching it.
Oh.
So that's actually part of our driver training.
I can barely
is
do that in
Getting
my
around
truck.
those without hitting it,
Get
but.
through it in my pickup.
Some
Going
people
too
can't. But for these particular ones, we would probably take the dimensions and physically take our truck to, say,
Yeah.
Grimes or something.
Yeah.
And see what it looks like. But if we can make it around the Clark streets, again, my guess is these are bigger, which are
Yeah.
much bigger.
And we've had we have 3 roundabouts in this community that for a long time at, outside of the Clark Street ones at 156th in Boston, Boston and Berkshire. And we haven't had, to my knowledge, any issues with our emergency vehicles getting through those roundabouts. Obviously, the 156 in Boston one is bigger because it's dual, it's 2-lane through there. But even the Berkshire in Boston and then the Berkshire in Sheridan, I think, are the other 2. And we have, to my knowledge, have not had any issues with those.
But along
roundabouts.
those lines, like I like roundabouts, but it all is about the dimensions of it and how
Mhm.
they're laid
Yeah,
out.
design it right.
Yeah, and so like 156 in Boston's fine. But then I think like 142nd in Douglas and Urbandale, that's a really nice big roundabout. So do we have a sense for what I know we don't have the exact dimensions, but do we have a sense for what we're planning here in this location?
laid out.
Yeah, they'd be 160 to 170 feet around. And then I guess, design standards over time. So 156 in Boston is probably 20 years old.
Because that
They've-
to me still feels pretty new.
Yeah, so, and we've updated a lot of the, I guess, design criteria over time where it's, now you see a lot of the newer, like the 142nd in Douglas, where you kind of really kink the entry angle to really slow people down. And then the exit angles you can kind of take those faster. They kind of come off. Whereas at 156 in Boston at the time, it was really looks a lot more symmetrical where you're trying to slow people down coming into it and slowing people down leaving
Right.
it as well. So
So which one would you envision that these along would be more like 156 in Boston or like 142nd and Douglas?
it's going to look a lot like 142nd in Douglas, especially in Douglas.
Okay.
So
Yeah, especially Douglas, Alice's,
So
that'll
let
look.
me ask an even harder question.
Okay.
How are they going to compare? So Cedar Falls, they redid their commercial
Like the sack.
district recently.
Mhm.
And this is going to be an unfair question. I already explained
Finish.
that. How will they compare to that? Because those have like bypass, right turn bypasses.
Yep.
They're very easy to,
Flyovers.
they're not flyovers, but like you said, they are designed to slow you down when you come
Yep.
in, but then the exit is much
A lot.
easier to just kind of get out.
Yes. So, yeah, so the right turn bypass he was talking about, they'll look like that at Horizon. That's what we're proposing at Horizon because of that.
Commercial area.
Yeah, so you have an extra lane, so there'll probably be that right turn bypass. So here is very conceptually, so we get really picky when we design these things now because it's the entry angle is incredibly important. So we'll actually one of the challenges with designing a roundabout is designing it so a car has to enter it fairly slowly and drive around it fairly slowly, but then we also can drive the fire trucks and the semi around it as well. So we check a lot of things and it's a very iterative process. So this is like what you'd see at like 142nd and Douglas, where you really kick that entry angle over. So, we'll have a wider median on Alice's Road, but then you'll actually maybe even swing them over to the left and really make that a sharp radius for those lanes that have to go around. What we're talking about with a hybrid roundabout, and it won't quite look like this. We've talked to staff about this already, but the when we call it a hybrid roundabout, so you have the two lanes that would go around similar to like 142nd and Douglas, but you only have one lane on the side road. So if you wanted to turn, essentially turning left, you would only take the center lane to be able to turn around. That would be the only lane that would go through. What we've talked about with staff is there'd really only be one lane. It would be striped as one lane, but we'd actually probably pave this. So if there was a maintenance that needed to take place where you kind of had to close this lane, seal some cracks, or there was a fender bender, so you had a police officer sitting in this lane, that you'd be able to get around them without completely shutting down the roundabout, because that's kind of a problem with some of those as well. The other thing we're looking at with this is, I was going to get to this, is this is already developed on this corner. So another thing is these roundabouts are bigger. We would need some additional permanent right-of-way. The 120-foot corridor is pretty well established through this with one minor exception. So these roundabouts would require additional permanent right-of-way to be able to put these in. Also, kind of just while we're talking about kind of design things, we're proposing a trail up the west side of Alice's Road. Roundabouts tend to be safer for pedestrians as well, because so they cross away from the roundabout. So one of the things that make roundabouts safe is the fact that you're only really worried about one thing at a time. So when you're entering the roundabout, you're going fairly slow, you'd yield to the pedestrian, that pedestrian's only worried about traffic in one direction, because once they get to the median, they have a pedestrian refuge where then they can worry about traffic in the other direction. Once you get past the pedestrian, then you can yield to the person in the circle and you get through. And when you get here, you have a vehicle length where you could stop again and yield to that pedestrian who's going through. So there's a lot of different things that we think about with the design of the roundabouts. So, but very conceptually, this is what they would look like.
So with 6 potential roundabouts out there, we're talking about this project. One of the things is in the center of those roundabouts, are we looking at having some landscaping then, things of that nature?
Yes, absolutely. So the landscaping in the center. So typically there's kind of a mountable curb. There's what we call a truck apron for those bigger vehicles. So you kind of pave the inside. Usually we make that a different color just so it doesn't look like you're supposed to drive on it. And then we have landscaping in the middle. That's both aesthetically pleasing and it also is functional. It actually makes you try to block things you're not supposed to be looking at. So we want you looking at, the traffic that's in the circle, the people you're supposed to be yielding to, and not necessarily looking at a bunch of other stuff. So one of the aesthetics thing, we haven't looked a lot at aesthetics yet. That's part of one of the things we're tasked with this project. What we would envision is, north of Douglas, you're obviously in Clive on both sides where you've already done some master planning with the wilds theme in this area. What we're thinking right now is that the phase 1 area from Horizon up to Douglas, that's probably going to look a little different than the area north of Douglas. So that the area north of Douglas, landscaping will tell you, yes, I'm in Clive, and the area from Douglas down to Horizon will tell you I'm in this transitional area where I'm in Waukee and
Some
Clive.
trash bins down.
So within that transitional area right there, where you've got landscaping in the center, this Matt's kind of question for you too.
Yeah.
Where we've got 2 different cities involved. Does that look at, we talk about preventive maintenance and upkeep, those type of things. Is that something we work with Waukee together, 2080 or something of that nature down the road to forecast that relationship?
100%. So with any of these boundary roads, we have maintenance agreements, 2080 agreements on what city is responsible for snow removal. Obviously, with where the center line is at, that's usually the pavement responsibility if there's a patch that needs to be done. We would have to work through all of that in terms of an operational agreement with the city of Waukee for this phase 1 stretch. And to Gabe's point, in terms of that transition on landscaping, so Waukee's kind of established an aesthetic on Alice's Road to the south of Hickman and kind of up to that Horizon intersection. And so what we're going to need to work on together between the 2 communities is what's that transition look like to then the wilds theme as you come into Clive, because one thing that we've put a lot of focus on in any infrastructure improvement, particularly that crosses the green belt, like this will eventually as it works its way north, like we did with the Westgate Bridge, is then incorporating that design aesthetic for this district, which is the wilds district for the green belt. How does that get incorporated into that landscaping? And the median circles are a great opportunity to do that, whether it's landscaping, public art, a lot of opportunities to do that in terms of, and you've noticed here recently, or the last couple of years, the park staff have done a pretty big rehaul of a lot of our roundabouts out there, the one at 156 in Boston and Berkshire, to kind of up, since it's been 20 years for some of those roundabouts, to really update the landscaping on those. And so we'll have to work through of who's going to be responsible for what and equitably along this corridor between Waukee and Clive, because they're the entire west border, west side of this stretch, all the way up to Douglas, and the developed side, where they're fully developed on their side, and then we're fully on the east side. So we'll have to work together. And for example, following this conversation tonight, these two gentlemen are going to be going to the city of Waukee in a couple of weeks to have the same presentation and talk about the roundabouts. And I think Gabe and Todd's point, I think is really important. And one thing that why staff is also supportive of the roundabouts is, you know, you've all heard complaints about the speeds on Alice's Road. To the point where we even changed the speed limit here not that long ago. As we transition from a commercial zone to a residential zone, I think those roundabouts really send a signal to all those folks driving that, hey, this is a different area. We've got people, you know, walking dogs, walking their kids on bikes. We want to really have some traffic calming and then to have it also be the cheapest option life cycle. It might be a little bit more expensive up front to put a roundabout in, but a traffic signal you got to take care of and pay the electric on and maintain for the life of that facility. Whereas a roundabout, it's just like a street. Yes, you have more landscaping expense, right? That's taken into account, but you're not having those traffic signals where you're having a lot higher level of maintenance. Some point you got to replace a lot of the components of a traffic signal over time. So to see the life cycle cost makes sense, as well as kind of we'll call it the land use zone, and what makes sense more for a residential use makes sense as well. Just seems to kind of come all in a line with this entire corridor. Of course, we've got the phase one a little bit more honed in, but and then Douglas, and then as we get to the Douglas and Berkshire one, there'll be a little bit more detailed conversation that we'll have, especially with the surrounding neighborhood, because that's adjacent to Shula Elementary. And to Gabe's point, it might be hard for folks to understand, but it's actually safer for pedestrians and a traffic signal. That's likely going to be an intersection where we're going to have kids crossing. Although that neighborhood to the north doesn't go to Schuler today, we know from what we've heard from the Waukee School District that at some point that neighborhood, that Angel Park neighborhood, is going to be going to Schuler. And so there will be kids crossing. Of course, there'll be probably a crossing guard associated with that, just like there would be if there was a traffic signal. But that one we know will be a little just more sensitive, that we had to be careful about how we talk through that with the neighborhood. But all the other spots in this corridor, you know, those roundabouts make sense. We still need to figure out a little bit Prairie and Airline Drive, which are in between Douglas and Berkshire. Because we still have future development of commercial multifamily to the west. Actually, he's showing it right there with Prairie Drive, how Prairie Drive would connect over from Berkshire and the Shadow Creek neighborhood. Those are two we still need to do a little bit more work on. And of course, that has to be part of the Pell process as well. So we've got a little bit more time, but we've got future development in those 80 acres to the west. And so and some of that will be neighborhood commercial, but also multifamily. So we have to kind of think through what that Airline and Prairie Drive connections need to look like. But we have a pretty good understanding of what those other ones need to be, and think it makes a whole lot of sense for this community in the long term, and to have that traffic calming along that whole corridor.
I have a question, Your Honor.
Yes, Susan.
And that is, this is a major connector and will be going far to the north. We already know it is, to the south. So I just want to make sure we're not just thinking about this relatively small residential piece that we have in Clive, and are really thinking about how it functions with the whole system. And so I'm just a little concerned to hear, you know, about, well, let's do the traffic calming here when there might not be at any other place along here. It's very potentially going to have commercial components going on to the north as this builds out. So I just like to know that we're not investing too much in terms of extra resources and that kind of thing to do this more expensive type of build out that's an anomaly for the corridor as a whole.
Yeah, so that's a very good point, and that's actually one of the reasons we're recommending the roundabouts as well, because traffic through a residential area is very peaky. You go to work in the morning, you come home at night, but traffic signals are on all the time. So you might not need a traffic signal at 11 o'clock at night, but you're still stopped at the traffic signal as you move through the corridor. Roundabouts, you're moving throughout all hours of the day. So that's why it works, you know, operationally, as we looked at the traffic for traffic projections into the future for the corridor, and roundabouts operate better than the signals.
Level of service.
Yeah.
higher.
What's that?
Level of service. was
The
higher.
level of service
yeah.
was higher, yes, that for the roundabout.
And like we've been saying, this is a residential area, and if it's commercial to the north and commercial to the south, roundabouts help designate that this is a different area. You should be driving differently as a driver by using these roundabouts. So we see it as kind of a benefit to have the roundabouts to say this is a different area, so pay attention. as
But
a
will
driver.
it be able to function in that connector role without having to have too
Yes.
low of a speed limit in this
Yep.
area? It needs to be moving traffic through there.
Yep, and the roundabouts will allow that.
You looked at the future volumes 2050 from the Des Moines MPO, correct?
Correct.
And you evaluated this based on the level of service on those traffics for both the traffic signals and the roundabouts.
Correct.
And the level of service for the roundabouts was actually higher than it was for the signals.
Yeah.
And that's why the recommendation came as it did.
Right.
I think immediately to the north in Urbandale, I'm trying to recall, I don't think they have a ton of commercial activity immediately to the north because they have an elementary school that's about half a mile to the north, right? I think Reagan Elementary is about half a mile or a mile up north of there. And part of the reason we did have a brief conversation with Urbandale at one point in time about Meredith and Alice's actually being a roundabout. The challenge that we had there was the geography. It falls off so hard to that southwest corner. It would have been hard to physically put a roundabout there versus these other spots, because that was an area we even talked about when, if you go way back, when we had these conversations with Urbandale and Waukee of what these three arterial roads, Meredith, Alice's, and Warrior would look like. We did talk about that, just the geometry of the intersection and that fall off of the geography just did not make sense for a roundabout. Hence why we have a traffic signal there at Meredith and Alice's Road. But most of the development to the north continues to be residential in Urbandale. It's really once you get to Waukee, and then when you get further north, maybe when you get closer to Highway 44, where, again, I don't know what Grimes' plans are related to commercial activity, but then you're going to get a couple miles at least to the north. So, whether Urbandale decides to do something similar in those intersections, I don't think I think they've chosen to go the traffic signal and kind of wider road route. But we think that this also kind of sets Clive apart a little bit in terms of, especially to Todd's point, when you have folks coming home or going out for dinner at 7 o'clock and the traffic on Alice's Road is a lot calmer, that side street person now doesn't have to sit at a red light for a full cycle. They can just flow right through onto Alice's Road. Whereas you look at a lot like Ted and I in University, right? If you're on that side street, you still got to go through that traffic signal. And when we're, leaving our houses, even if it's at 7 or 8 o'clock at night, you might be sitting there waiting at 123rd. Whereas if you're on a roundabout, you're flowing right through it. Now that's obviously a commercial corridor versus this being a residential corridor.
I've cursed that light more than once.
You mentioned that the construction costs are slightly higher for roundabouts, but I'm not seeing that on the breakdown here. It looks, it's close, but it's.
We're actually at a good time right now because we're either building the full big intersection for a traffic signal or we're building the roundabout. So right now the costs are actually pretty close.
They're pretty close now.
They're pretty close right now. And actually the signal
Traffic
might.
signals are getting more expensive.
Yes,
That's a part of
exactly.
it.
The traffic signals are $400,000 to $500,000 right now. So.
Just the signals.
Just the signals.
It's not the.
So without the signals, I think it was like neck and neck for construction between an intersection and the roundabout, and that's just a traffic signal, just,
Yeah.
it just,
I misspoke there. Historically, the roundabouts have been
Right.
slightly more expensive.
and they tend to be more
initially.
expensive when you have an intersection fully built out as a stop control, and then you have to tear out that pavement and build in the roundabout. That's when the roundabout gets to be more expensive. But right now, when we have an blank slate, it's pretty comparative, and roundabout being a little bit less.
So the Douglas Berkshire one may be the one where the roundabout is probably initially cost a little bit more expensive because we have a
Yep.
four-way stop set condition there.
Yeah.
I strongly prefer the roundabout option. I mean, I do think it makes us more distinctive, and I think that's important, right? And then all the other ancillary benefits, cost, the pedestrian and cyclist access and the traffic calming. I just think, to me, it's a no-brainer.
So, and roundabouts don't have to limit commercial traffic. Like,
Right.
like I said, Cedar Falls, their commercial district is all roundabouts. They don't have any, they have a signal off the highway. And then they have a signal when you're out of the commercial district. Everything else is roundabouts.
I think Marion did that too. If I remember, didn't Marion do a bunch of roundabouts through their main street?
That sounds right.
Yeah, as well.
You know, the two roundabouts, for this particular project, checks all the blocks for me too. I think there's gonna be a learning curve, which there typically is with the neighborhoods, but as long as it can accommodate the fire concerns and public safety concerns from a cost perspective and flow of traffic, it seems to make sense in this situation.
Another example why a sister city should be Placencia or Belmopine, Belize, because in Belize, there's one traffic signal and the rest are all roundabouts. The entire country has gone to roundabouts. So.
Nice. Duly noted.
Need a delegation.
Carmel,
Sister city piece will.
Carmel, Indiana, they had the first traffic signal in the US, and then they went so far with all the traffic signals, they've taken it all out except for one to be roundabouts.
You're not helping my cause with Indiana.
Sorry, I was just using that as an example as like a city,
Belize.
I was just using an example as a city that took out a bunch of traffic signals,
Country.
put in roundabouts. And I mean, they have 3-lane roundabouts through that community. So we won't get to that level of traffic, but
That's, so what we'll do from this point is, of course, City Waukee also wanted to know, how we feel about the design proposals, and we'll share that with them. And what this will really set the stage for is, as we get further along in this design process, is starting to do public engagement again, another round of it with the neighborhood, and starting to talk about this and kind of putting the facts out there, based on the reaction that I'm hearing from council. This is it seems like the direction that makes this most sense for our community and for this corridor. And so we will go in that kind of informed mode with this information in terms of educating folks of how this is, better from a pedestrian standpoint. There's videos out there. There's a lot of information that we could put together, with Snyder, with the information that they have on our communications team. So as we start to educate the neighborhood of what this corridor may look like and how can we put that information out there, because it will be a change. Of course, you're going from a 2-lane county road to a 4-lane with roundabouts. It'll be pretty significant change, but this was important for us tonight, at least especially on phase 1, because that's the one that we have to get designs and bid out the door this next winter. And I don't know if Gabe or Todd, is there anything else that you needed from us at this point?
No, just really direction. Like I said, the critical path is going to be purchasing that right away next. So we're going to have to go back, start that detailed design of these roundabouts so we know the impacts. And then really probably this summer, I'll be back in front of you telling me to getting your permission to go out and negotiate right away for those. So I think that gives us what we need. Any questions for us?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Doug, flooding.
Thank you. As we've done the last few years, we've tried to take a moment to kind of reflect on what has occurred over the last 12 months as it relates to the city's flood preparedness. We've been very fortunate, obviously, for the last few years to be in a state of not flooding. But at some point in the future, we're certainly going to have to experience and deal with the ramifications of the flooding along Walnut Creek. I'm just going to run you through a few of the primary components that have occurred over the last 12 months and also give you a little bit of insight with some new information that we've recently received in terms of how we're moving forward in the buyout area specifically. First piece I just wanted to reflect on is our Be Flood Ready brochure that we send out to all property owners within the City of Clive's floodplain. This particular iteration went out to about 500 people. The primary focus this year was in discussing flood insurance. Wanting to remind folks again, because it may be a situation that for the last few years without a flood, people kind of get lackadaisical with what their risks are. Maybe let the flood insurance lapse because it hasn't flooded. What's the big deal? So we want to really put a focus on that over the next few months, making sure that people are assessing their risk appropriately and obtaining the appropriate risk management tools for their circumstances. Again, just a reminder, the city does participate in the community rating system, which does provide those folks that need flood insurance a 25% discount on those premiums. So although when we started the program, we probably had a few more policy holders because we've done some mitigation that way. But at that time, when I ran the analysis, it was saving the community property owners about $90,000 per year because of the CRS program. So again, real money that folks in the community are able to save because of the efforts that you folks take to make the city safer.
What was that percentage on, for the last, was it 20%, 55%? I'm trying to think that they saved.
25%.
25.
Yep. One of the other activities that the city does every year is the annual flood preparedness tabletop exercise. So all of the departments come together to pretend that we've got a flooding situation to deal with and really exercise the muscles associated with responding to that flood event. We've got a very detailed flood preparedness emergency operations plan. The plan is great, but the situation is always evolving. So it's great for us to, on an annual basis, work through that process, make sure that things haven't changed, or maybe they have changed and we need to alter the way that we go about doing the operations. But each year we go through that process. Each year, at the end of the process, there is an after action report, which I included in your packet just for situational awareness. But we've got 2 or 3 pages of to-dos that we need to check on, or we need to update, or we need to consider to make sure that, again, we can respond to and make sure that our residents are prepared when that circumstance does arise. So again, there's some to-dos in here that we'll be working on, and then some of it will come back to you in the future in terms of approvals for certain actions or purchases of different types of components to improve the plan itself.
One thing I wanted to note with this is we haven't used the aqua dams in a while. So one thing that Jeff and the Public Works crew noted is might be good for us to roll one of them out and just see how they're holding up in terms of the material. So we're going to coordinate that with the businesses down there at some point here, maybe this spring or early summer, to at a time that is convenient to roll one out and fill it up and make sure that the rubber membrane there is doing well, just because, knock on wood, fortunately, they haven't been rolled out since 2018. So we feel like we need to do that and get kind of an understanding of what is the life, span of those, because those are relatively new. So that's something that you'll see. And if you're ever, once we coordinate that and set a date for it, if you're interested to see what it looks like when they fill those up and throw a hydrant open, it's pretty fascinating. But we'll have more information for you on that later this spring.
One of the other activities that we've been working through in the last few months, and will continue to work through in the next few months and come back to you, is the update to the city's hazard mitigation plan. We do this in concert with Polk County and all of the other communities within the county to develop this regional Polk County hazard mitigation plan. The primary benefit for the plan is really twofold. One, it does give communities and stakeholders an opportunity to think about those regional risk and what are the resources that are available within the region to address those risks. As we all know, the flood doesn't care about a corporate boundary. The tornado doesn't care about a corporate boundary. So we need to make sure that we are prepared together as a region. That's what the planning process allows for. Secondarily, with respect to the city of Clive specifically, the hazard mitigation plan itself becomes the foundation for what we use for grant applications. So the projects that we go after, the ones related to the flood buyout area, for example, originate in this plan. They must be in the plan to then be able to ask for funding and other federal types of assistance. So we are going through the process of updating it. I gave you in your packet just kind of the first cut from a staff perspective of all the types of hazard mitigation projects that we have been noodling on. The plan horizon is really 5 years. The list of to-dos is probably 25 years. So there'll need to be some prioritization around it. Clearly, the flooding related ones will be most highly prioritized for the most part, but all hazard types are identified in the planning process, and mitigation and other ways of providing benefits are being considered. If you do have thoughts as you kind of peruse that, or have come up with an idea or a thought on a specific hazard type or specific mitigation beyond the flooding, we'd certainly be interested in hearing those and see if we can get them incorporated. But the plan's in the process of being drafted, and we'll come back to you for a review and consideration within the next couple of months. Any questions on that one?
Questions for Doug?
A couple other quick things related specifically to our flood buyout area. Again, we've gotten into the habit of having an annual meeting for the neighborhood group out there, specifically those property owners that are in the flood buyout area. We'll be sending out notice and inviting them in for conversation. I believe we've got it tentatively scheduled for May 1st, Wednesday. We'll do it at 5:30, and we're going to try to do it at the Harbach facility this year. Last year didn't have a real great attendance, and a lot of that is because we are not just doing this once a year. We're having these kinds of conversations whenever property owners are ready. So again, I'm not sure that we'll get a great attendance either, because I've had an enormous number of conversations over the last 12 months with these property owners. But we'll see if we can also kind of entice them to come and talk, because we are going to have some conversations around the temporary park space in the buyout area. We've talked about that before. In this intervening time between the buyouts and whatever the future holds for the land, we see this as a real opportunity to take advantage of that space, that open space that we're creating, and put some productive utilization to it for the neighborhood. So we're going to have a conversation with them about what are the types of things that would be good for the neighborhood. Maybe it's a community garden, or maybe it's a dog park, or maybe it's a flat area to play ball or soccer or whatever it might be. So we're going to have those conversations, and then also talk about some flooding situations if we can. So certainly if you have time and interest, you certainly be invited. I think Matt will share the details once we get the letter prepared and get that out to folks.
And I'll put it on the list of future dates in my weekly update.
Last thing, just wanted to again give a quick summary of the buyout program itself. As you can see, we've now accomplished 21 acquisitions in the area since 2019. Those are all highlighted in the yellow and the orange at this point. The thing that I also wanted to give you just a little sense of is the buyout program is continuing to go very well. We have been very well received with the residents and the business owners. We still are having the conversations meeting the property owners where they're at. So again, the way I try to explain this is it is all about being patient, but being persistent and being prepared. This is not a 1-year thing. It's not a 3-year thing. It's not a 5-year thing. This is a when property owners are ready to make a move. We want to be there ready to support them in their transition into the next space. And we've taken that approach. It's worked very well. And again, we're building those relationships with property owners that I know that, you know, there's 2 or 3 of them that within the next year or the next 3 years are ready to go. Okay, well, we're going to make sure that we're geared up and prepared to take care of them when they're ready to do it. So we'll continue with that process. I would suspect we'll get another 1 or 2, maybe 3 houses purchased this next year. But the other part that I did want to bring your attention to is in the spirit of Major League Baseball starting up here, a couple of baseball analogies for you. The Clive team has done very well in their games this week. We had 3 pretty significant victories, and won't be able to get into a lot of details tonight, but the gist of it is that we're very, very close to being able to have a pretty significant funding announcement related to some of the hazard mitigation grants that we've been asking for over the last 2 years. So both monies associated with the advanced planning that's necessary to kind of take this conceptual plan to the next stage of what will this area look like in 20 years. And we also have gotten some favorable news on the appeal that you may remember that we made on behalf of one of the acquisitions we were working on, were originally denied. We have won that appeal and we'll be receiving funding for that project. And then we have found a creative way to get after another very substantial funding source. So we're looking at about another 11 or $12 million coming our way through this other program we've been working on. So this week, all in told, we've feel pretty confident of about $15 million coming our way for this program. The part that makes it even better is the way we've angled it. I've said that we really need to be at better than 5 to 1 in terms of city money. This is 27 to 1. So grand
That's a
slam.
500-foot home run right there.
Yeah.
Grand slam for Team Clive this week.
More to come on
More to come on that. Again,
people to thank.
yeah, definitely that. So we're feeling very good about this. This next year, again, will be fairly significant in my mind in terms of both physical changes as well as then setting these foundations for this next thing in the city of Clive, not just demolition and buyouts, but this next thing that is really going to enhance the neighborhood. That is starting to become more clear in my mind in terms of the opportunity for the neighborhood. So very excited about that. And I think I'll stop there and answer any questions.
So Doug, you had in the packet about the property rental program
Yes,
basically not happening. Did you have any further
Yes.
information on that?
Thank you. I got so excited about the other thing that I forgot about that one. Yeah, this one, we've talked about this a little bit in the past. We've got 4 houses that we've acquired over the last year and a half, the ones that are highlighted in orange specifically. The houses are not in terrible shape. And as we kind of went through them and did the acquisitions, we just kind of wondered, was there something else we could do with them in an interim basis? The situation is that they're located in the floodplain right at the very north edge of the floodplain. And the houses certainly need to go away because of the flood risk. When the large flood event comes, they are going to get wet. But the question is, the land might be able to be manipulated to support a new house or a new thing on it. And the problem that we have as a city is we've acquired these. So I'm just going to use some round numbers. Those 4 houses, let's just say cost $1 million. If we use federal funds, we will be able to get back, recoup about 800,000 of that million and cover the cost of the demolition. It's great, but it means that we can never do anything with the land. It can only be green space. Because I think that there is some future opportunity for the land, we've been trying to be more flexible, more patient with figuring out what to do with the property. We could certainly go and tear the houses down for $30,000 or $40,000 a piece, but then I won't be able to get the 800,000 back. So we were noodling on the ideas of how do we kind of keep the houses productive, make sure that they're not a nuisance or a problem for the neighborhood for the next 2 or 3 years until we figure things out. And we came up with the idea of, well, if we could find a partner, maybe these could be used for housing rentals. The situation is that although they're in decent shape, they're not in good enough shape to meet the rental code requirements. Each one is going to require about $40,000 of improvements just to meet the minimum standard. And since the lifespan of this rental unit is only maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 years, you know, the return on investment from an investor's perspective is pretty low. We tried to find some kind of more nonprofit oriented partners that might have an interest in facilitating an affordable housing unit on a short-term basis and working with us. We just haven't found a partner that has found this idea advantageous enough to jump on board. Basically, the thought is, hey, if you're going to spend $100,000 or $120,000, why don't you just build an affordable housing unit that'll be there forever versus dilly-dally around for a couple years benefit. I fully understand it from their perspective. It's just we have such a unique circumstance that you know, even if it was simply a break-even proposition, it's still a good thing for us. So I don't really see that as being an option at this point, unless we want to get into the rental business, which we are, as staff, absolutely not advocating for. So we're in a situation where we've got two options. The preferred option in my mind is simply be patient. We continue to do the regular yard maintenance, removal of snow, you know, things of that nature to make sure that they don't become an eyesore or a nuisance. But a house that's unoccupied and not getting the care and attention, they just tend to kind of fall apart. I think we have a few years that we can kind of milk it out before they become really an attractive nuisance type problem. That would be my recommendation because, again, I think there is a possibility of getting dollars back for the investments we've already made, either through FEMA or through a redevelopment concept. Alternatively, we can spend the money today, tear them down, grass them up, and, you know, just take that choice and live with the consequences as well.
So beyond yard care and snow removal, what else are we, or how are we ensuring that they're not becoming nuisances? So do we have utilities on? Are we
Yep.
winterizing the pipes? Are we boarding them up or?
Yep, they've all been winterized, so everything's been pushed out of the pipes. Everything's been turned off in terms of water itself. 3 of the 4, we actually are still running electric to it. So, you know, we have a $10 electric and gas bill a month for a couple of these units. Otherwise, yes, it's mowing the grass, removing the snow. We send one of our guys through and around and in through the houses once a week just to kind of make sure that We don't have a squatter or graffiti or vandalism or whatever it might be. I will say that the guy that was taking a look at it was a little surprised here just recently, went in there and fire department and police were doing some training and there was a mannequin laying in the floor. But looking through the window was a little bit scary.
As someone who goes through a lot of vacant houses, that would be scary as heck, I can tell.
Yes. So, I mean, they're getting some utilization just from a kind of that training perspective as well. But we are trying to do what we can to truly and honestly make it so that they are not problems for the neighborhood.
We're not blowing holes in the wall of these ones though.
Yeah, these aren't
We are
boarded
aware of
up. They're not-
Emerald Isle.
They're definitely not.
I
So
That was
have
my
a
concern,
comment.
was the neighbors next to those. So sorry, Susan, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I'm glad these have been arm's length transactions, you know, paying relatively market price. It's just concerning to me to talk about redevelopment in a situation where we have told the people that these are flood prone properties, that they're basically dangerous. It's been part of why they've agreed to make the sale. So I just feel like we should be transparent with people if we're really thinking that redevelopment is a potential, we should have that figured out as we talk to others who might be making their properties available for sale. So I'm really comfortable with the decision to not do the rental right now while all that's being figured out. But I feel like it is important for the ongoing discussions with the current property owners who haven't sold their properties yet.
Are we looking at redevelopment, like actual redevelopment?
Do we share? Sorry. go ahead.
Okay.
That's what he said, that there are the two, either FEMA or redevelopment.
I just remember that vision plan and it has redevelopment on the outer, it has like not gentle density, it has real, it has
Yeah.
density.
You kind of pick a line in the sand of where could we
Right,
redevelop.
right.
and-
So I'm just wondering, do we share that with the folks that?
Yeah,
talking-
so as you'll recall, the 86th Street District 1 neighborhood plan, that's the vision that you're talking about. And basically the choice made in that planning process was the floodplain is most important. The ability to convey floodwaters is what needs to happen in this space. Secondarily, what else can we do at the ground? There'll certainly be opportunities for park and recreation amenities integrated with stormwater management. But again, just thinking through it, if we have to dig a big hole here, just generally speaking, because we want stormwater management or flood mitigation benefits, got to do something with that dirt. And hauling it a long ways is not very cost effective. So is there the opportunity on the higher side of the floodplain to leverage the dirt in a way that then sets the grades high enough that a new development, a new house, and it very well could be a house, it could be a townhome, it could be a small apartment building. Again, I think we're talking about something that is in character with the neighborhood. Is that an opportunity when you connect all those dots? That's the part that we have a vision of. We don't know if it technically works. The grant that we've received the money from for now will answer that question over the next 12 months. With respect to the transparency, the District 1 plan, that vision document, that one image that I know you've seen that just shows kind of the whole green area here and shows the redevelopment on the edge. That's a very large image on my office wall next to the table that I have all of the conversations with these property owners with. So there's a lot of finger pointing and a lot of markers, things of that nature as we have conversations with folks. So certainly there is, there should be very little ambiguity in terms of what the city's hopes are for this area in 15 to 20 years.
I'm curious, have we gotten any comments from those people that you've had discussions with about?
Yeah, I would say that mostly they don't care because they're simply selling to the city
Yeah.
at a fair market value. And they're transitioning into the next stop. There are certainly some that say, boy, this is going to be a great place. I'm sorry, I'm having to leave. So I think that they share and appreciate that opportunity that we have for the area. I have had no one say, boy, you're only trying to make this deal because you're going to double up with a development package. I've had no one even think that in my mind. But again, we've been very open, particularly lately with the single family homeowners, and we've been very open with we're not sure what we're gonna do with it. We might rent it out for a little bit. Again, we're not gonna make big money on this. This is purely, can we provide an affordable housing in an interim condition? Because otherwise it costs us money to mow the grass and shovel the snow and pay the electric bill. So if I can get somebody else to do it, it's a win-win. So again, everything has been up and up with folks. That is, again, in my mind, the only way this works is building that trust with these folks. And it's a long-term proposition. And if you make a mistake, we're 21 into 43, I think, more. So if we stub our toe, it's going to make things a whole lot harder to finish this.
I think it's important to point out too, Doug was alluding to earlier, some of our grant wins that we're going to talk about. One of them is a technical assistance grant to kind of take that plan to another level. I don't know if you wanted to speak to, that will be even more detailed of that vision plan of what that looks like and what you may do on those edges.
That's the technical work. We've got a pretty picture, but does it really technically work? Is it financially viable? We feel pretty confident in the concept, but obviously if you're starting to talk about many millions of dollars, you got to prove it out. And in part of that proving it out is finding a path where this thing is cost beneficial. And that is the most important variable in hazard mitigation funding. So the project has to yield at least $1 benefit for the dollar spent at a minimum. Anything less, you're on your own. But we do think that we can develop a project that takes this area, takes this neighborhood to a better place, and adds value for not just us, but the benefits in some cases I'm thinking about are going to be in Windsor Heights. If we can keep the water here, it reduces flood risk down there. We can take credit for that benefit to help pay for the thing in Clive. So we just got to figure out how to connect the dots here.
We've had the city of Windsor Heights reach out to us about that because they realize that some of the work that we're doing could benefit them, and how could they partner with us at some point in the future on that. And that could be helpful for future grant
You could write a check.
requests and other opportunities going forward. We even talked this year of our annual flood tabletop. That next year we might want to do it with Windsor Heights staff, because Rick Rowe, as our consultant, he's also consulting with Windsor Heights on developing their own flood operations plan, similar to kind of our template. And so we kind of brought up of, maybe we should do one together so they see how much resource we have to put towards floods, and they're also being impacted at the same time. So making sure that we're not overlapping resources of, are we asking them to do something for us at the same time they're dealing with something, and vice versa. So that's something that also is a collaboration opportunity.
So the question on the houses, the four and hopefully more that we acquire, we don't, again, need an answer tonight. I don't have a rental concept that's viable at the moment, but probably in the near future, maybe this summer and into fall, It's something that we'll need to evaluate together and decide. Can we live with the interim condition for another year or so until we have some more solid decisions made? Or do we just go ahead and knock them down and deal with it in that fashion? So it's just something to think about. And we'll come back to that here later this summer and into the fall.
Is there a common denominator on that 40K? I mean, carpet or HVAC or?
It would be nice if it was one thing. It's lots of little things. It's not like go fix the furnace for 10 grand. It's flooring, painting, GFCI outlets, smoke detectors, handrail, it's just lots of little things that is going to require lots of different contractors.
Gotcha.
So it just kind of adds up quick,
Welcome to
unfortunately.
my world, John.
You got
Anything
that
else I can
fire
answer
trucks
for you?
Going pretty quick by John's house. That
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Several
Shut that
years.
puppy up.
Several years ago.
Is that
Nice.
fraternity? So
Anything else for Doug? Thanks, Doug.
I want to say congratulations. 15 million.
huge win.
It was a good week for Team Clive.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hearing more about that, Doug.
I would say
Good
that
stuff.
I want to give Doug a lot of credit. He's put a lot of time and effort into figuring out the most efficient way to weed through the federal government bureaucracy. And I think there's very few people in this state that has it figured out as well as he does. And that is a huge benefit to Clive taxpayers in this community to see these visions move forward and leveraging, in this case, 27-1 city dollars to federal dollars. That's some real money right there. And that's a testament to his and his team's hard work on this and the CRS program, and then all the departments, because they all have to chip in to make the CRS discounts happen and our flood operations planning. Takes a team, but he's definitely put a lot of effort into this, and we've focused a lot of his effort in that area. So
Good job. Correspondence. Reports. Pete.
Thank you, Your Honor. So tomorrow you will get a chance to see what we think is pretty well cooked, the final version of the resident survey that will be going out to our randomly selected households here in mid-April, and then opening up to the rest of the community after we've had a chance for those first folks to get a chance to respond. Matt will include that in his Friday update, assuming we're at a good spot on it. Second, we will also be sharing some information starting next week on our first annual tree sale in Clive. It's not a huge number of trees this year, but it's going to be 50, and they are all very good looking, mature. There's variety of them too. And we're looking forward to engaging the residents who are looking to add to the canopy here in the city of Clive. Finally, over the last week, we've had some really positive touches with Congressman Nunn. Councilman Klein and I were able to attend a meeting with the congressman at Polk County Emergency Operations Center and discuss a number of wins that we've had working with his office and a number of things that his office can continue to do to help us as we work with federal agencies.
Anything else, Pete?
No, Your Honor.
Thanks. Recon.
Mike's already previewing the
Getting prep.
report here, yeah. So yeah, we had another DART meeting.
Imagine that.
Yeah, so the current discussion for the budget, which is obviously the big talking point, there has been a one-time funding from City of Des Moines, but it's not the franchise fee. That's still being debated at the Des Moines, City Council with the mayor. So right now, the way that DART has moved forward is they've submitted the larger budget that they would be able to use if the City of Des Moines passed the franchise fee, but they've only authorized the DART staff to spend the amount that they currently have. If that makes sense. So, and that's because if the rationale behind that is if the City of Des Moines later passes the franchise fee, they don't want to be stuck with that smaller budget. They want to be able to institute those services that they're currently thinking about cutting. So right now they're looking at a 20% service cut. They've taken the public comment, and I think I've said this before, what they're looking at doing is increasing the wait times between the routes rather than removing routes. There's a couple exceptions to that. The D line. And that's actually it. The D line's the only one that's eliminated now. All the others are just, their wait times increase, right? Instead of like a 30-minute route, it now becomes 60, or things like that. If there's specific routes you want to know about, I took a picture of the little graph they have.
How about the main Clive routes? Was it 92?
Yeah,
How's
so
that affected?
so that one will be affected. It'll go from well, so we don't know yet because like the 92 is an express route, and that's actually part of the update as well. So I think last time I mentioned how there was a proposal that concerned me about they want to get rid of the express routes and then figure out, do they reinvest that money in something else, or do they, just take the money and run kind of. They did provide an update during this last meeting stating that they're not going to do that. They're not going to cut the route and then figure out what to do. They're going to come back. So they are going to change the hours in line with some of these service cut reductions. But they're going to keep the routes until they can figure out what they want to propose to the commission, whether that's changing it to a different type of service or a different type of bus, whatever it is, because they have identified these routes as underperforming. And then basically they're going to propose that new solution in the winter of this year, and then it'll go into effect next year. Yeah.
So postpone any of the decisions that need to be made now in hopes of money coming.
No,
from
no. So
Des
the
Moines?
express route is different.
Because you still have to give notice though, right? Like several months' notice for even a change.
Well, so yeah,
And so that
so
puts
there's
them
two
on a
parts to
longer
it.
clock.
The express route timing changes.
Yeah.
Really what they're thinking of right now is they're going to remove that latest route time, 6 p.m.
Oh.
And they're going to add an earlier route time, because what they're seeing is more peak travel in the morning and nobody's riding that 6 o'clock. Everybody's like heading back
Home already.
earlier,
Yeah.
right? So it's not really reducing the service, so there wouldn't be any public comment at this point. It would be when they go to do that whatever that new proposal that they want to do in the winter, bring to the commission, that's when there would need to be public comment after that, which is why the change wouldn't go into effect until 2025.
When would they make the decisions on all of the other cuts, right? Like you have two sets of books going right now.
So right now they're moving forward with the 20% service cuts, which is that's with the reduced budget that they're authorized to operate in right now. If the city of Des Moines passes a franchise fee of 1.5%, then it would amount to a 10% service cut instead, which would primarily just affect weekend routes. There would still be a few that change slightly in the wait times, but most of it is weekend routes at that point. So that's kind of the budget piece where they're landing. It's still very much up in the air whether Des Moines will move forward with this. So, I think preparing for the 20% service cuts and moving that forward makes sense. And honestly, I'm not sure I'd waste my time on the rest of it at this point, but that's more my personal opinion. There was discussion around Reimagine Dart as well, which I've continued to say that I don't really necessarily see the value in that at this time. I can tell you we're going to be on the losing end of that.
Is that a study? Can you
Yeah,
give me a
sorry.
quick
Yeah.
background of Reimagine Dart?
So Reimagine Dart is supposed to be a new study that looks at everything, quote unquote, everything within Dart as to how it operates, what service levels are appropriate, what does the fleet look like, basically everything.
Full
Yeah,
analysis.
yeah.
Like the tomorrow plan.
It is the tomorrow plan for the Dart. Have you asked and for all the studies in the past 6, 7 years to be on a slide of the financial studies and route?
It's a good
So-
asset, maybe.
I
I
would,
think they showed it on one slide in
Yeah,
one
they-
presentation.
I mean,
They
I-
did
I-
early on, they had like
Yeah.
kind of a synopsis of the studies that have been done, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like a full listing, I don't
and I
think.
only say this to Chicago because I was on that board for 7 years or whatever and until this year. And those 7 years, we did
Yeah,
a
the-
study a year.
Yeah, the
at
traffic
least
optimization study.
a study
you know,
a
they're-
year.
Dart
yeah, it's
forward.
Dart
Dart
forward.
forward.
I mean, I still got
Let me
shirts
play
that say
devil's
dart
advocate,
forward.
though. I mean, I'm not for just paying
Socks.
for more studies. I agree. I think the difference is that the past studies have been done within the existing model that DART operates by, the hub and spoke model, right? Which, just my opinion, the hub and spoke model no longer works. And so I think the intent for this one is to find a different model, an Uber model or something else that's completely different than the hub and spoke. At least that's
So-
my
so-
understanding.
So that might be what people are expecting. The Uber model doesn't.
I'm not saying that that's the right
Right,
model.
right,
I'm just
right.
throwing
But
that out as an
I
example.
get it, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people want to do with this study is, kind of validate, are we doing the best? Is this the best? Or like you said, is there just a fundamentally different network that we need to look at? But I have serious concerns with both the structure of how they're gonna do this, as well as the cost, right? It's got a 7-figure budget tied to it. They've got,
7.
yeah, it's
Million
like
bucks.
1.2 million, I think. or something
1.2,
like
I
that.
think.
Yeah. They have about 400,000 in funding that they've found, but
Grants.
grants. But that's still obviously simple math. There's 800,000 left. And I've said if I was to support this study, it would have to be fully funded by other sources, right? We're not going to spend, I don't see the responsibility in spending $800,000 of money that could go to other things, even if it couldn't be used for service routes, it could be used for fleet, it could be used for capital improvements.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah, Wi-Fi, right? I actually brought that up. Um,
They want to
So-
cut Wi-Fi.
So,
60 K, yeah, 60 grand a year and they want to cut it.
well, but there was opposition to cutting Wi-Fi even at 60,000, but we're okay with spending. Never,
1.3.
yeah, I'll stop. But yeah, so I'm very quickly becoming the sole dissenting opinion though. So I don't.
Tuna's support has dropped.
So Altoona has said like they're concerned about the price, but they're on board in principle. Like,
And I think, again, I think the reason why is because people are seeing that the current model is a failure. And so you have to figure out another way to deliver these services, because right now it's just a money suck.
Agreed.
That's all it is. And so we've got to figure out a way to do this effectively and more cost effectively. And if we just keep doing what we've been doing all along, it's not gonna improve. So that,
fundamentally, I don't disagree. The problem is it's the timing, it's the kind of the reasoning for the timing as well. That concerns me. And it's also, like I said, I have concerns about the way it's being structured, right? So they presented it as 3 phases. There'd be a phase 1 with kind of the community input, all the stakeholder input, right? Which is supposed to be the cheaper phase because it doesn't require as much consultants. Phase 2 is the really expensive phase. It's where they reimagine whatever network the consultants come up with based on that stakeholder feedback. And then the problem I have is phase 3 doesn't come until obviously phase 3 at the end, and it's the budget and how do we get this put together with the communities involved? That should be one of the things that we get up front in my mind, or at least elements of it, right? You can't, I could come up with this great design, not me personally, but you could come up with this great design and then find out there's $1 billion price tag attached to it, and it's not going to happen. So that's my concern. It's also some of the structural elements of that phase 1. It lends itself towards chaos, in my opinion. There's a lot of stakeholders involved, which there should be. don't get me wrong. But it's just kind of put them all in a room and let them figure it out right now, which I'm hoping changes, right? That's still under discussion as to what that phase one looks like and who's moderating or, facilitating those conversations. I think that's still in flux. But like I said, I do have concerns generally.
We appreciate all your work. Anything else?
Glad it's you.
Yeah. Just real, one other comment on DART. Track is their rider advisory committee. So it's a group of people that ride the different services that DART offers. They did provide a pretty forthright update as to what their opinion is. They actually said they don't really care about the Wi-Fi on the bus, but they do care about the technology to pick your route, be able to get the app services and the online services. And they also talked about what kind of fleet they want to see, what kind of service level they want to see. So that was very helpful, at least for me, to kind of hear directly from people that are riding. Obviously, they're riding the bus. They're the ones that are going to be impacted by this.
I guess what concerns me, and we won't take this too much longer, but what concerns me is what I'm hearing from you to confirm what I've been hearing from others, is that they took kind of the approach of here's Wi-Fi, here's the app going, here's the signs on the poles going, here's all these amenities that the people want and like, but not too many offers up of we'll let a bus go one more year, or some of our vans go an extra 2 years, or, change some things behind the scenes. I mean, we had this 12 years ago discussion of, it depends on who you let have that budget book to redline, and if you give that to the board to redline, they'll be entirely different things. And if you give it to a staff to redline, it'll be mosquito spraying and snow removal and some other things. So your eyes go, whoa, we can't cut all that,
Right.
And so I'm hearing that they've put a lot of the niceties up for cuts, and not a
So
lot of deep stuff.
I would say, actually, in my opinion, it seems to be a mix.
Okay.
So part of the problem with the fleet cuts is we haven't, so Luis actually provided an update on this. We haven't been keeping up with the replacement cycle on the large buses, which honestly.
On the
maybe we don't-
electric ones, or?
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother story. I thought you said you didn't want to talk about this very much longer.
Come on, McCoy, you're dragging this out.
But
5 minutes here.
yeah, but so basically they are extending the life of the buses already. And so there is a point where it's a diminishing return, like you'd be
Right.
putting more money into the repair
Right.
than just to,
Sure.
to get the new bus. So
Okay.
that's kind of where they're at.
Just one more question.
Any-
That's it.
That's it?
Tonight, yeah.
Good.
Okay, Icon Water Trails. We were presented with a study that was done over 2 years by the Polk County Conservation and Drake University, where they were studying the water quality of the various water trails. We have 5 of them: Des Moines River, Walnut Creek, Beaver Creek, et cetera. Oh, look out. And so, very interesting study. Walnut Creek actually came out as the second highest of the pathogens in E. coli that was found in those 5. Now, Beaver Creek was the worst. We were second. We hit the level of you don't want to really have swimming or your head under the water at low flow. And actually Beaver Creek was significantly worse than Walnut Creek. So they had by far the worst. They ascribed that to the Grimes Waterworks and some of the issues that they had, but that's just recently shut down, I believe, and then Camp Dodge as well. So those, and it was mostly human fecal.
It's a sewage.
Yeah, that was getting into
effluent.
in Beaver Creek. Now with Walnut Creek, it was some of that, but it was also a mixture of bovine upstream. So all the others were good. They had no issues. So, it was generally a positive report for our water trails. Beaver Creek has some real issues. Hopefully that's going to be worked through with the Grimes Waterworks being shut down. For us, with Walnut Creek, it was, we got to get some cooperation with the cattle upstream. And then their belief was that there's just some septic and sewer leaks that is causing some of that. So, but again, it wasn't terrible. It was just above the threshold where they didn't want to see it for Walnut Creek. So, but the overall message was that the good news is for our water trails, for recreation, they're generally safe. And so that was positive. And so that was the presentation.
Johnston Creek, the big one.
Yeah,
That's Beaver.
that's Beaver Creek. Yeah.
Oh, they have a full out kayak system.
Yeah. And in fairness, being above the threshold wasn't that it was going to kill you. It was that you could get sick from it. You get diarrhea, things of that nature from it. So
Just adds to the problem.
true. But so it wasn't like a 5-alarm fire kind of thing. It was, there's a potential for folks to get sick from it. So, and then just from a fundraising standpoint, we're at 93% of the private fundraising goal. So we're getting real close, and they believe that we're going to get to 100% here within a couple months. So that's it.
Thanks, Ted. Eric.
The mayor and I attended the MAC meeting where we were given a legislative update by the league on all the current legislation out there. So we will keep everybody informed and what's going on with that. So that's all, Mayor.
Very good. Susan.
Nothing this evening.
Michael. I attended the staff appreciation.
Shoots and ladders.
Shoots and ladder that the police and fire hosted. Quite impressive. A lot of people. I do like that format. The police had some activities on their side, and the fire had some activities on their side, and you went to both and participated. And then they had a lot of food, but a lot of people there. So I really like that format.
Appreciate that. The staff did a really nice job with that. These are these quarterly appreciation events, and we're moving around all the different facilities. It was public safety's turn, and had a beautiful day for it, and had some fun with some Nerf guns and some fire hose and some Jaws of Life. You could pick up a ping pong ball with a Jaws of Life, and it was.
You could try.
You could try. You could try.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, you could try. So it was appreciate. I know some of you were there, so appreciate having there. And I think it's been going well. And then the next big one that we'll be doing is in June. That'll be the Food Truck Friday event. That's the bigger staff appreciation one where I know I've sent that date already out to you that we'd love you all there, and we'll have a little bit of a program with that one, and kickball tournament, now a sand volleyball tournament, but I don't want Councilmember Weaver to get hurt there either.
Yeah, well, I'll be out of the country.
Also, that's right.
No chance.
And we'll have some of the fun awards that we did last year. We expanded upon those. So that will be a little bit bigger one. Again, we'll have Clive cash for folks for employees and their families and yourselves to use the food trucks. So the more details coming out. That's June 7th, that first Friday in June. But appreciate that. And now they're going to have to figure out new games next year. That'll probably be the hardest thing for some of these quarterly activities, but got a creative staff that come up with some fun stuff.
Was that all you had, Michael?
That's it.
Then we'll automatically segue into Matt's report.
Just a couple of things. The mayor and I had a visit with the new Art Center, Des Moines Art Center director. It was nice having a conversation with her and talking a little bit about they're interested in doing a little bit more outreach in the metro area and the communities. And we kind of started giving them some ideas of some things they might want to think about, particularly working with cities and our park and rec programs, library programs, how we do more things with art, kind of akin to what Des Moines Performing Arts has done with some programming. And like we had a program in Lenan Park last year, the Bubble Guy, if you remember that Des Moines Performing Arts brought. So we kind of gave them some examples of what some other arts organizations. It was about kind of a thanks for the Bravo funding. I know Sally was here at the last council meeting, so I wanted to mention that. We're having some conversations. Councilmember McElhaney, Mayor Edwards, myself, and Pete and Richard, we sat down and started talking about what the future looks like for the Clive Historical Society. I think there is a tough future and one that might likely need a different path forward for those facilities and where the state of where that board is at today. To be pretty direct about it, I think they're going to be winding down. And so it's a matter of what does that look like for the city of Clive in terms of, I think our small group kind of talked about an evolution of what recognizing the Clive's history looks like and maybe not getting so tied to physical assets, but how can we use some of that information in archives to help tell Clive stories and not necessarily be focused on the traditional Clive Historical Society model. So we're going to be putting some information together, kind of level set the facts of, that property in particular where the Swanson House is at in terms of city ownership, what assets the Historical Society has. But I think it's fair to say that there is going to be a transition here pretty soon. And then it's a question for this council in terms of what does that look like and in terms of the city's role in that and what that can evolve. I think we'll try to generate some ideas with that, but it'll definitely be a topic for strategic planning this year. I don't know if Shrikant, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. I know there's definitely, well, to put it even more bluntly, they're in the process of winding down. And so, they're just kind of making sure that they don't just like abandon ship. They want to make sure it's a good transition. So, but they've started that process.
Mhm. So we'll be putting together some more information to have a better conversation with you all in the near future. Legislation, the stormwater bill was signed by the governor earlier this week. And so staff we'll have some conversations with you all. There's some work that we need to do there on adjusting some things in terms of our stormwater management manual. Also, there was a bill passed related to residential exterior cladding in terms of units 12 or less, in terms of what you can require. Again, staff is evaluating those pieces of legislation and changes in design guidelines, for example. I don't know if you recall a few months ago when Amanda was in front of you talking about the design guidelines and saying we may have to come back and amend these if certain legislation passed, and well, one of them did. There's some other legislation out there too that I'll update you on during my weekly update tomorrow.
I just have to say, because I can't help myself
for it.
on this topic.
Here we go.
Yeah, and well, citing of a building and your state legislators are involved. This is insane of where the end will be, right? That it is, I mean, you're talking local control, citing on a building. State legislators are going to mandate from Clive to Sioux City to Fairfield, anywhere. Centerville. Who cares? They're all the same, right? Just mandated across. This is the problem with mandates and policies from the legislators. Why are we continuously asking for more? We should be asking for less from them, right? This is beyond insane. Now I've heard it all. Citing. Yikes.
So I agree. It definitely feels like local control is slowly dying by 1,000 cuts.
It's just going to cost the residents more and more money, and they just don't see it, right? I mean, all these policies and laws are going to cost, in one way or the other, every resident. And it's insane that we're playing
Even the
this game.
topsoil, it saves developers money. It'll cost the residents that stay there more.
Right.
Yep.
Well, one of the points the West Des Moines mayor always makes when someone says, well, the city's going to pay for that. And his point is, it's the taxpayers.
That's
It's the
right.
taxpayers
That's
that are
right.
paying this.
Yeah, that's something that we've, I know a lot of the city manager colleagues we've talked about is when we hear somebody say, well, the cities need to pay, is we instantly need to correct people and say, you mean the taxpayers are going to be paying for that? I mean, to Art's point earlier, when we were talking at the hearing, right? The city isn't this abstract thing. It's made up of a collection of taxpayers and constituents and voters. So that's definitely something that we keep in mind. And we've talked about that with some of the 411 pension legislation that's out there of, well, the employers need to pay. Well, it's like more because of the expansion of benefits. It's like, whoa, hold on. That's taxpayers that make up those employers. So it's just changing the conversation a little bit, but I agree with the frustration and
But allow your residents to make the decision of what they want. right? What they want to hear, what they want to get, what they want to see on the side of their houses and their buildings. And that is how this government was built, right? Is the more local you can get, in theory, the better results you get. And and that's not Republican or Democrat. That's just truth, right? That's a bipartisan fact. So anyways, I'm done, but legislators. I hope they're gone soon, out of the House, before they can make anything else happen.
Well, the choir hears you.
Last thing I had, Your Honor, just a couple of MPO items. There is a safety action plan that the MPO is working on. This is a metro-wide plan that is pretty important. Gives all the metro area then access to some federal legislation, some of the infrastructure bills. There needs to be a safety action plan for the metro area to be kind of that speaks to some of these needs to then make cities eligible to apply for some of these dollars. So this is something that the MPO staff and their consultants have been working on, really gearing up here over the last few months. They are reaching out to communities. They've reached out at a staff level in terms of doing some public engagement. At a staff level, we felt like we didn't know that there would be really much in terms of a community meeting in terms of getting attendance, but one option that they did provide was coming to a council meeting, kind of giving a presentation on the safety factors that they're looking at. Staff provided a lot of feedback to them already, showing you some of that, allowing the council to provide some feedback. We'd publicize it, that we were having this as a portion of a council meeting. We thought that was maybe a more efficient way to have this dialogue than trying to set up a separate community meeting and separate conversation, when I think it's important for you all to weigh in on that as well. So that's at least the approach that I'd like to send back to the consultant and staff probably not the next meeting, but maybe that first meeting in May, on May 2nd, to get that done. So if council, if there's any hesitation on that, fairly comfortable with that strategy. Okay. The last thing is, I think I know the answer to this one, but I'll ask. It is also related to the MPO. There's been some discussion about passenger rail on the rail line between Des Moines and Grimes. And that rail line goes through Clive. So there's been a question to those communities that are along that rail line that there is a desire to do a study for the feasibility of the rail line, the infrastructure itself to handle passenger rail. So Councilmember Weaver and I discussed this as our MPO representative, and I think there is where the MPO said they are wanting to see if those communities would like to participate financially in that study. It's a relatively small study, 25,000, and so it would be a relatively nominal 2,500, 3,000, 4,000, something like that when you break it down by all the entities involved. There's some private entities, development interests involved, I think at either ends, and some communities. As Councilmember Weaver and I talked about it, it was kind of back to the DART conversation. If we're struggling to figure out public transit, I don't know what viability there is for passenger rail, or whether there'd even be a stop in Clive on some said line. Just had some hesitation, but before we responded, I responded back to the MPO staff of whether or not this council wants to hear a presentation on it or a whole pitch. I wanted to just level set first with you all of whether or not there's really much interest. I think Councilmember Weaver and the staff, we didn't have a whole lot of interest in it, but I felt like I needed to bring it
Keep in
up.
mind that this is just a technical feasibility for the rail itself. Let's say that they say, yep, it could be used technically. Well, then the next thing is another study for economic feasibility. And then there's going to be an environmental study, and who knows how many
Dart
studies.
forward, dart backwards,
Yeah,
dart
so,
forever.
My opinion was, we say yes to this, then they're going to want our skin in the game for the next study, and then the next study. And
So what communities are they?
I don't even know. When they brought this
Could
up
be
at the
Windsor
MPO, they
Heights,
didn't even
Clive,
talk about stops
Urbandale.
along the way. It was just the terminus from Grimes to Des Moines. And so my understanding at that time was that it was just Grimes and Des Moines. The MPO board did not want to have anything to do with paying the 25,000. I know I spoke up about it. It's like, if this private entity wants to study this, great, they can pay for it. And if Des Moines and Grimes want, because they're going to benefit from this potentially, they can, have a piece in it. then apparently they're now trying to get the individual communities in between, which I'm assuming would be Urbandale, Clive, and Windsor Heights.
West Des Moines too.
Oh, maybe.
You could
West Des Moines
revive
too,
your
so.
Clive Historical Society stop. Down at
The depot, we can
Swanson
move the depot over there.
Yeah.
I don't think it'll necessarily halt this effort. It was just
That's right.
a question on financial participation. And I
Want
think
to
that we're,
contribute.
I think at staff level, we had some hesitancy. And then after I talked to Ted, we had a lot more hesitancy, but I wanted to at least bring it up before I responded back to the MPO.
Is Grimes even interested?
I don't know.
I mean, that
I
would
didn't
be-
ask.
I would
think
be,
that-
I would
that
be surprised if they are.
Yeah, because they
honestly.
ripped out all their tracks in the city. And so that track only goes to the CTI concrete building. That ends there, right after Beiser, right after the recycling facility. It's done. So, but anyway, I would.
I don't know. I haven't talked to them.
If Grimes doesn't want it.
I'll follow, unless there's any concern with that, I'll follow up with Dylan and just, with the MPO staff and
And
indicate.
as the topic comes up more, I can bring the information back here.
Right.
You know, so.
Okay. That's all the feedback I needed, Your Honor. That's all I have unless there's questions.
Anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, we'll adjourn at 8:35.